Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into the landscape of Protestant Christianity in South Korea.
Yeah.
We've gathered quite a mix of sources, academic papers, church case studies, news articles, even some online discussions.
Right. A real variety.
The goal is to kind of synthesize all this for you, to give you a clearer picture of its history, where it is now, the challenges and how it's changing.
Absolutely. And because the sources are so varied, we can look at it from, well, multiple angles. We'll trace that amazing growth story, but also look at the pressures it's facing inside and out and, how different groups are trying to navigate things today.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, maybe. Our sources talk a lot about the early growth, and the story of Youngnak Church really jumps out. Founded back in 1945 by North Korean refugees.
That's right. And their mission was pretty powerful from the start,
Mhm.
serving the marginalized, people who'd fled the North, the poor, widows, orphans.
Yeah, and the founder, Han, he became this major figure, right? Even won the Templeton Prize later on.
He did. And that prize, it wasn't just for him. It signaled this moment of like global recognition for Korean Protestantism's contribution to spiritual progress.
Which is interesting, setting that against some of the later challenges we'll get into.
Definitely. And what's really fascinating is how that initial focus on helping the vulnerable, that social engagement, really shaped how people saw Protestantism early on.
Right, it wasn't just abstract belief.
Exactly. It was tangible help during a really turbulent time. That foundation was pretty crucial for its early growth.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. South Korea's economy booms, and alongside that, you see the rise of these massive megachurches.
Huge growth.
But our sources suggest this is also when things started to turn, perception-wise. The public image began to shift. This is where it gets really interesting. What started causing that change?
Well, it seems like a few related things came together. One really big factor was a series of scandals involving very high-profile pastors.
Right, like the Reverend David Youngie Cho case.
Exactly. Head of Yodo, full gospel church, the world's biggest megachurch, his conviction for breach of trust and tax evasion. That really shook public confidence.
And weren't there issues with his son, too?
Yeah, allegations surrounding his son kind of added fuel to the fire. These cases just raised huge questions about accountability at the top.
Absolutely. And it wasn't only about money, was it? There's this concept mentioned, gapjil.
Ah, yes, gapjil. It basically means arrogant, abusive behavior by people in power. And unfortunately, some pastors got caught up in that kind of behavior.
Which led to really negative press.
Hugely negative. And even, satirical nicknames like muksa.
Explain that one.
It's a play on muksa, the Korean word for pastor, but twisted to mean glutton pastor. It's pretty scathing. Showed the level of public criticism about perceived greed or excess.
Wow. And we actually have data backing this up, don't we?
We do. There's this thing called the Religious Reputation Quotient, or RRQ. It compared how the public saw Protestantism versus Catholicism and Buddhism.
And how did Protestantism fare?
Not well, unfortunately. It consistently scored lower in several key areas, like social contribution was one where it scored significantly lower. People didn't see its actions as aligning with, the good of society as much as the other religions.
Interesting. What other area?
Also lower on things like emotional appeal, the quality of programs and services, the perceived integrity of leaders and members too, and significantly financial transparency.
So a broad-based issue, not just one thing. The data really confirms a dip in trust. And that must have consequences, right? I mean, if people don't trust the institution.
Big consequences. The sources say a fair number of non-believers specifically pointed to that bad reputation as why they wouldn't listen to proselytizing.
Wow.
And many said they'd actually tell friends or family not to join a religion with a bad image. It's a serious barrier to outreach.
Yeah, no kidding. So that's the external view. What about internally? What's been happening inside the Protestant church?
Well, one major thing is this phenomenon called believing without belonging.
Okay, what's that?
It's people who still identify as Christian. They still have faith, but they're not actively participating in a church community.
So they believe, but they don't belong to a specific church.
Pretty much. And the numbers for this group apparently jumped quite a bit between 2012 and 2017.
Huh. Any idea why? Disillusionment?
Could be disillusionment with organized religion, yeah. Or maybe just preferring a more individual approach to spirituality. It's interesting, too, that offline church attendance hasn't really bounced back fully after COVID either.
Raises questions about how faith is being expressed now, doesn't it?
It really does. Is it just decline, or is it also a shift in practice?
And this seems connected to other internal issues, too, like financial struggles for pastors,
Yes, definitely. There's been a noticeable rise in bivocational ministry.
meaning pastors need second jobs.
Exactly. Holding down secular work just to make ends meet. One survey from 2016 suggested, I think, a large majority of pastors were living below the minimum cost of living.
That's a huge contrast to the image of some megachurch pastors, isn't it?
A stark contrast. And it highlights this financial strain many leaders are under. Alongside that, you hear internal critiques about um, materialism creeping in, maybe too much exclusivism, or focusing too much on just growing numbers.
Rather than spiritual depth.
Right. Instead of focusing on the overall health of the church community, some sources point back to the early church model in Acts. Fellowship, teaching, community care as being more important than just counting heads.
Okay, so we have this damaged public image, these internal shifts like believing without belonging, financial pressures. How are churches responding? They can't just be standing still, surely.
No, not at all. We're seeing quite a few different responses and attempts to adapt. Church revitalization is one area.
Like fixing things from the inside?
Kind of. The case study of Hosanna Church is pretty interesting here. They really focused on discipleship, building ministry teams, empowering lay people in the church.
How did they do that?
They used methods like intensive small groups, they called them Derek Bang, and also these really big evangelism campaigns, Great Awakening evangelism.
Did it work?
Well, the data they tracked on their budget between 1987 and 2007 shows really significant growth during that revitalization period. So it seems those focused efforts did have a tangible, positive impact.
That's encouraging. What else? Any other models emerging?
Yes. Another key trend is the rise of smaller missional churches.
Smaller how? And what's missional mean here?
Smaller in size, often meeting in unconventional spaces. And missional generally means they're focused on living out the gospel in their specific local context, often with a strong emphasis on community and addressing social issues.
Okay, give me an example.
Well, there's one mentioned called Cafe Underwood. It's literally a cafe that doubles as a shared worship space. And another example is a church that started inside a publishing office and got involved in social justice work. These often involve those bivocational ministers we mentioned.
So it's kind of a move away from the huge megachurch model.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It emphasizes deeper community, local engagement, maybe trying to reconnect with those earlier values of service.
And what about reaching younger people? That's often a challenge.
True. And sources look at innovation in campus ministries at universities. They seem to be trying new things to connect with young adults who might be more secular or wary of traditional religion.
Like what kind of things?
Offering meditation classes, for instance, but without overt religious framing. Or running programs just focused on building trust and community.
Trying to meet them where they are.
Exactly. But it's a tricky balance, isn't it? How do you stay relevant and approachable while holding on to your distinct religious identity? That's the challenge they're navigating.
Yeah, definitely a tightrope walk. Now, we also have to touch on areas of, well, friction and conflict. Our sources are pretty clear about strong opposition from conservative Protestant groups towards LGBTQ+ rights.
Yes, that's a major point of tension.
Mm.
Reports mention groups actively disrupting queer events, lobbying hard against anti-discrimination laws.
And that stance definitely affects public perception.
Right, undoubtedly. It creates a significant divide, not just with secular society, but potentially within the Protestant community itself. It brings up big questions about how religious groups engage with changing social values.
And another really contentious issue highlighted is this practice of hereditary succession in some megachurches.
Yes. Passing the leadership, essentially, from parent to child.
Which many see as, well, problematic.
Very problematic for critics. It raises concerns about it being a form of corruption, like privatizing the church's resources and power within a family.
And it's not just the churches already hit by scandals doing this.
Apparently not. Sources say even some churches without that history are facing criticism for adopting this practice now. It touches on fundamental issues of accountability, transparency, and governance in these huge organizations.
It's important to balance this, though. Despite all these current issues, we shouldn't forget the positive historical role Protestant Christianity played, right?
Absolutely crucial point. The sources remind us of its role in the Korean independence movement against Japanese rule, for example.
Right, and contributions to modernization, education.
Exactly. That historical legacy as a force for social progress and national development is still very significant for many Koreans and provides important context.
And looking ahead, one more area mentioned is intergenerational ministry, especially maybe in the diaspora, like Korean American churches.
Yes, efforts to bridge the gap between generations. creating ways for older and younger members to connect, learn from each other, share faith.
Recognizing parents' role in passing on faith, but also maintaining cultural identity.
Precisely. It's about fostering that sense of belonging and shared experience, which is vital for sustaining faith communities over the long haul, especially when culture and religion are so intertwined.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive shows a religious landscape in South Korea that's had just phenomenal growth and influence.
Undeniably.
But now it's grappling with some really significant challenges. Public image problems, internal shifts, adapting to a society that's changing incredibly fast.
hmm Issues around leadership integrity, how to engage with social issues, how to connect meaningfully with younger generations, these all seem critical moving forward.
Yeah, and there's this real tension, isn't there, between the incredible past success and the very real difficulties of the present.
There really is. And it raises fundamental questions about where things go from here. But the emergence of new approaches, like those small missional churches or the campus ministry innovations, shows there's still dynamism, a search for relevance.
It's also striking that contrast between the early mission serving the poor and marginalized and some of the current criticisms about wealth and power.
It highlights the complexity, the evolution over time. It's not a simple story.
Definitely not. Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to chew on.
Yeah, given this deep history and all the current complexities we've talked about, how will the Korean Protestant Church reconcile its past influence with these present demands for, greater integrity, more social responsibility, and genuine engagement with a diverse and increasingly secular society?
And what role will those believing without belonging individuals play in whatever comes next? Will they drift away, or will they shape the church's future in some unexpected way?
It's clear this is a story still very much unfolding, lots of compelling narratives yet to play out.